Speaking of change, we have a tremendous opportunity to hear someone's story of life change and transformation. So I'm going to ask Tinna Mills to come, and she is going to share with us her story of life change. So would you give a big hand for Tinna Mills?
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so there's the picture, and here's my 1,000 or so words. I've always been a follower, a people pleaser, and a perfectionist. That is how I hid from God. I hid right in plain sight, right in the middle of churches spouting platitudes about Jesus' love. I hid. I did what was expected of me, and that included a trip to the waters of baptism at age 15 so that my family and I could celebrate the outward acceptance of the traditions, culture, and community of the church. After all, I did appreciate that community support and the idea of having a Heavenly Father to rescue me like Superman in times of distress was comforting. I'd found comfort and security in the order and structure of the church. If anything, rules were my God, and self-control was my king. But I didn't want anyone to know this. I wasn't sure I could even understand or admit it to myself because I knew it wasn't supposed to be this way. But I didn't realize that there was any other way. So I hid. I hid in various kinds of churches, but they all succumbed in one way or another to the fate of unhealthy mentalities, which tore people apart instead of uniting them and caused pain rather than healing. I received accolades for being a helpful congregation member, and I was able to keep everything looking polished, neat, and clean on the outside most of the time. But I was trembling on the inside lest anyone discover that any tiny detail of my carefully manufactured persona was not essentially perfect. I truly believe that perfectionism is one of those sins that is not only tolerated, but essentially welcomed by much of the modern church. After all, perfectionists contribute and people pleasers get things done, but at what cost? It eats away at our very souls. Anxiety was my constant companion. As the Bible puts it, I was a whitewashed tomb, put together on the outside and dead on the inside. The first time I walked through the doors at Thrive, I had agreed to visit a friend who had moved on from the church where I was attending at the time. I didn't think much of it. It was only a visit. It was a visit to a place that was loud and boisterous and focused on pop culture, while I am essentially a quiet and traditional kind of person. I was skeptical, and I wasn't seeking change. If perfectionists are anything, it's stubborn when it comes to public appearances. I was not giving up on our current church just because the attendance was steadily dwindling and things were getting relationally rocky. No thanks. That would mean disappointing people and letting them perhaps think less of me, which, as always, I wanted to avoid at all costs. But the minute I walked through the doors at Thrive, that all changed. I could sense a camaraderie and a joy. I could see a sense of purpose that I knew that this community had something that I had been missing in my life for a very long time. I knew deep down that this was something that I could only grasp by letting go of that sense of duty and obligation that I had been holding on to so tightly my entire life. With a tagline that brashly proclaimed that there were no perfect people allowed, I knew that I wouldn't be able to hide in this community, not the way I had before. The Spirit of God was moving in me, and by the time Matt Moore started playing the second worship song, I was already a blubbering, emotional mess. I knew that God was calling me here and that he was calling me to healing. So I went home and I told my husband that I believed Thrive was going to be our new church home. Still, I wasn't sure I was ready to give up just yet. So as all good Christians do, I prayed about it and I waited for some sort of additional divine confirmation. Worship music has always played a huge role in my life. The lyrics stay with me, they inspire me, they speak directly to my heart. Sometimes they sneak up on me like a thief in the night. And one day I found myself in the car singing the following words. Have you been standing on your own feet too long? Have you been looking for a place where you belong? You can rest. You will find rest. Tears, more tears. I cry easily. But I sensed in these words God directly answering my prayers for transformation and belonging. And if that wasn't too obvious, those words were followed by these. Into your word, we're digging deep to know our Father's heart, and into the world, we're reaching out to show them who you are. We know that we were made for so much more. than ordinary lives. It's time for us to more than just survive. We were made to thrive. Yes, thrive. We were made to thrive. Okay, I get it, God. Now what? How do I move past living an ordinary life? How do I transition from merely surviving to thriving? Step 1, come out of hiding. I had to tread carefully because old habits die hard. But I started to volunteer in Thrive Kids. I started attending small group. I started talking to people in leadership. I started asking for prayers, and I started getting outside of my comfort zone. I started reading books about prayer, knowing that somehow prayer must be key in the transformation process that I saw. I started to get to know people and let myself be known. Risking the vulnerability of being real with both God and others have paid off in ways that I could not have asked or imagined. I began to attend Shift with Dr. Tom Rundell, where he introduced us to reading the Bible and following Jesus in an entirely new and revolutionary way. This more authentic gospel required a type of radical surrender that was unlike anything I had ever encountered in my life. Step 2, surrender. In learning to let go, I began coming home. After a lifetime in the church, I finally met Jesus. I finally accepted how much he loved me and how much I needed him. I decided to walk a journey marked by surrender and not the sinful illusion of self-sufficiency. I began to learn what it means to surrender and how surrendering to God can bring a peace as the storms of the life swirl around you. I learned what it means to truly be a child of the King, and it has rocked my world to the very core. I finally had some idea of what the Bible meant when it said that we have access through Jesus through a peace that passes understanding. The anxiety still came knocking. But when it did, I found myself handling it differently. The transformation was so astounding to me that I knew I needed to mark this change in my life with obedient celebration. I needed to return to the waters of baptism and publicly proclaim my newfound faith. This time, I was not taking on a burden of conformity and performance. I was washing it away. I was not saying that I believe I now have it all figured out. I was publicly proclaiming that I realize I don't. It was time to officially come out of hiding and mark the commencement of a new journey to a healthier, more authentic life. And as I entered the waters of baptism, God was loudly proclaiming to me, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." Isaiah 43:19. I had found a place where no perfect people were allowed, and I had learned that this is most definitely a good thing.